With winter upon us, the number of questions on the forums and Facebook about should I warm up my car or not start to increase. And in response to those questions, many people often post articles from the Washington Post or Road and Track or whoever that claims that warming up your car is not required, and in fact you're doing damage by warming it up before you drive it. Well, those arguments or those articles are full of crap. And the basis that they use to justify their claim is wrong. And I'm actually going to use that against them to tell you why they're wrong. So the first thing they say is that modern metallurgy doesn't need things to expand and fit right and blah blah. Well, sure, things are closer than they used to be, and you know, the modern machining and selection of materials is way better, and we have piston-to-wall clearances that are basically interference fit, you know, cold to warm with a high silicon alloy piston. There's almost no expansion or contraction of the piston, you know, with temperature, all that kind of stuff. That's great. That's accurate, okay? I'll go with that. However, there are things that do need to warm up, and that's your oil. If you're going to be running the car aggressively or driving it hard at all, your oil needs to be to a normal operating temperature. You know, they tell you, oh, we'll just get the oil thin enough for your environment. Well, it doesn't matter what viscosity oil you have. When it's cold, it's really thick. And it isn't like it's a flat line, you know, it is significantly thicker when it's cold. And I have a picture somewhere, and I'll see if I can show it to you, that shows oil viscosity versus temperature. And what you'll see is that even down at 80 degrees oil temperature, the viscosity of the oil from 80 degrees to 180 degrees is like 2 or 3 times of what it is when it's warm. Now we're talking about getting down into freezing temperatures or below freezing, and it doesn't matter if you have a 050 or a 2050, this stuff is still really thick, and it's far thicker than the engine would actually want at that temperature. So no, don't get in your car and just go drive it with this really cold, thick oil, because you're going to provide less protection to many parts of your engine. One of those parts, a very important part, being a turbocharger. The turbocharger needs a good supply of oil because they spin very fast. And so if you get into boost, the turbocharger could spin upwards of 120, 140,000 RPM based on what kind of turbo you have. But around town, you're going to pull 30, 60,000 RPM, you know, leaving a stop sign, maybe even on the freeway or something. You're going to turn that turbo very fast. It needs to have a good oil supply. It needs to have oil of the right viscosity, not super thick, you know, 40-degree oil. The next one they say is that a car runs richer when it's colder, and therefore you get more fuel in your oil. Well, I know why they're saying that, because there is some degree of truth to that. The problem is, it's not a problem. And that's what's funny about it. In fact, driving your car cold puts more fuel in the oil than letting your car idle, which is the exact opposite of what they tell you. But I'm going to show you. If you look at the closed-loop temperature correction, or closed-loop fuel target based on coolant temperature for, say, an 06 STI, which I'll put right there, what you will see is that at low loads, the ECU is actually adding less fuel to the engine. If you look at it, you'll see that even at 100 degrees coolant temp, at idle, it's not adding any extra fuel. But as you get into load, say where it says 1.7, you'll see on the screen there, it's adding 2.205. Well, that number 2 comes off the 14.7, right? So now you're running down in the 12 to 1 range. That's way richer than 14 to 1. So now, if you let your car idle at 100 degrees until it hit 176, then it would be putting a lot less fuel into the engine. And since it's an idle, it's a low load, it's getting less fuel, and it's being less enriched. So now if you drive this car when it's cold, you are not only putting more fuel in the engine because you're moving a car and making horsepower do so, you're doing it at a much richer AFR, which therefore means that more of it is more likely to go into your oil. Now, that being said, if you look at this value, 2.2 off of 14 puts you in the 12s. That's not that bad. Yeah, it's richer. It's not great for emissions, but it's still leaner than a lot of carbureted cars run, even at operating temperature, and have run for, you know, thousands and thousands of miles. So you're not doing a ton of damage to your car. It's not like you're just lopping off years of the life of your engine, you know. And if it's a Subaru, it's not lasting years anyways, so what? Second is people think that the car stay open loop until it's at operating temperature. Well, that is also false. The car only runs open loop until the oxygen sensor is warmed up. And the oxygen sensor warms up on its own time scale. It's slightly affected by the amount of exhaust heat coming across it. So you could shorten the time that the O2 sensor takes to warm up by about 20 seconds by driving it. But in 20 seconds, are you really going to do damage to your car? No. And regardless of coolant temp, as long as it's over negative 40 degrees below zero, right, or 40 degrees below zero, then the O2 sensor will provide feedback to the engine and will control it based on that table that I showed you. And in that case, it's always targeting those AFRs, which again are leaner at idle than it is at load. So, please, for the love of your cars, stop posting those crappy articles that say that no warm-up is required. If you want to have your car last, your engine oil temp is really important. Also, when oil gets hot, it almost always gets over 212 degrees, which is above the boiling point of water and well above the boiling point of fuel. The fuel and water are almost always boiled out of your engine when it's at operating temperature. That's one of the functions. That's why you see that we have these oil coolers that have coolant running through them. That helps them actually warm the oil up before you drive it, which is why only the manuals have it, the automatics don't. But it also keeps the temperature under control. However, it's at operating coolant temperature, which is usually 185 to 200 degrees if you ever monitor the coolant temp on your Subaru. And the oil temp in the operating engine is usually 20 to 40 degrees higher than the temperature of the water going through the cooler. And that puts you well above the boiling temp of water and fuel. So even if you did throw some fuel in your oil when it was cold, so what? It's going to get boiled out anyways. And if you change your oil at routine intervals, say 3,000 miles, which is really good for a turbocharged car, you're in really good shape. So again, those articles are bullshit. Feel free to start your car and let it warm up so it's nice and toasty when you get in. Sure makes getting ice off your window a whole lot easier. You're not killing your motor. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email at dominic@GetaDomTune.com. Thank you.